Hello, Canadians who are interested in the leadership and engagement of volunteers, particularly during National Volunteer Week 2012, which is coming up very shortly. My name is Karen Lynch, and I'm the Executive Director of Volunteer Alberta, which is a provincial capacity building organization working with volunteer centers in Alberta, and I'm also on the board of Volunteer Canada. I'm very pleased to be able to work with you this afternoon on understanding the complexities of government relations. I've been involved in government relations and politics for 34 years, and so I have a number of insights that I'm hoping that will help you develop your understanding of how to engage government, not only in a National Volunteer Week activities, but year-round in the work that we do to engage volunteers. So if you follow along with me, volunteer recognition, as you see, is obviously the effective volunteer engagement program. Many people are paying attention to volunteers during National Volunteer Week because, of course, it's a week that's dedicated towards this. But the effective engagement of volunteers and the recognition is a year-round program that basically allows us to be able to demonstrate the powerful social investment volunteers provide Canadians and Canada every single day. It's essential that the leadership, which in this case today we're talking about you and your boards and those who are elected officials and the unelected civil servants that work in our government, understand why it's important to engage volunteers in our activities and why it's important to recognize them. So hopefully what we're going to be able to do this afternoon is have a real quick conversation about the first 3 or 4 slides and then move on to some of the more meatier stuff. I found this quote by Winston Churchill, and I thought that it was perfect for today because it basically says that for all its faults, democracy is still the most enduring government style that we have, and that in Canada it has served us very well. As you know, we're a country that is envied by the rest of the world, not only for our economic stability, but our quality of living that we have. And we're known for being a country of caring people who are demonstrating that through volunteering, whether it be in the social services or parks, arts, and culture, whether it be in sports, recreation, education, or health, or across the entire subsector. So we're just going to go through 6 things here. You see them on your slides, and so we'll just start right now. I'm sure that for most of you, this is going to be just a real quick repeat of Social Studies 30, grade 12, or entry-level university and college courses. But we have 3 levels of government. We actually have 4 because we could actually add on the county government. For the purposes of this presentation today, we're going to talk about 3, which is municipal, provincial, and federal. We have, through our Constitution and our various laws and statutes, we have decided as a country who is going to do what. And although it often appears, if you pay attention to the media, that governments from different levels don't talk to each other, that's nonsense. Of course they do. And they try to cooperate to make sure that the citizenry is well served. The federal government is responsible for some of the issues that you see: taxation, our postal service, national defense, criminal law, Aboriginal affairs, and that the federal government structure, of course, is headed by Queen Elizabeth II. And as you can see on here, there is both the executive branch, which is Prime Minister Harper and his cabinet, and the legislative branch, which is the House of Commons. We had an election last year, so we're not going to be having another election for some time. There was a majority government elected by Canadians, and so for the next foreseeable future, we will have Prime Minister Harper and the Conservative Party of Canada leading our government. Provincial government, I'm sure you see yourself there on the right-hand side in one of the flags. It's responsible for direct taxation. Everybody other than Alberta has a sales tax. That's something that's provincial. And then you have municipal affairs, hospital licenses, and many provinces also have a department or a ministry, maybe not solely focused on the voluntary sector, but has as part of their mandate volunteerism. As you know, we have premiers, and then we have the cabinet, we have the civil service, we have deputy ministers and associate deputy ministers, and we have a variety of names for our elected officials across the country, MLAs, members of the Legislative Assembly, members of provincial parliament, or members of the National Assembly in Quebec. Municipal government has, many people say it's the government that's closest to the people. It's responsible for all the things like water and sewage and public transit, libraries, which is something I'm passionate about. I'm chair of the Alberta Library Trustees Association. Economic development, they also have things like community leagues and parks and recreation facilities. And we have, as you know, we have mayors, we have city and town managers, councils, and all those. For many organizations and many volunteer centers in Canada, their closest relationship is with this level of government, municipal government. Advocacy. I am someone that tries not to use the word lobbyist because it's a word that has, unfortunately, some great negative connotations from our experience with our neighbors to the south. But advocacy is basically when you have trying to be able to share something that you're passionate about that impacts all the people in your community or province or nation in regards to public policy. Making that public official aware of your concerns and the issue is what advocacy is. And it's perfectly reasonable and logical to be involved in that. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to advocate to government effectively. And I want to talk with you just a little bit about two things. One is you can either look at National Volunteer Week 2012 as the only reason that you're going to be speaking with and advocating to government, or you could look at National Volunteer Week 2012 as the beginning of a cycle that is going to culminate in 2013 for an even stronger association with your national, with your politicians or the elected officials that you're inviting. What I mean by that is that the majority of volunteer centers during National Volunteer Week have some kind of an event, okay, where they invite the community, where they invite their volunteers, and it seems to be de rigueur that you actually then write a letter to your either your civic, your provincial, and or your federal politician for that particular geography to come and attend the ceremonies. That is not necessarily a very good example of government relations. What it is means that you have sent an invitation for an event that the politician can attend and is willing to attend not only because it's volunteerism, and who could argue with that, but also because a number of their constituents are going to be at this event, and it gives them an opportunity to be seen and to be heard. If that's your only goal, then I can tell you how to do that fairly quickly. Make sure that you give enough advance notice in your letter. Be very clear in your letter who is going to be attending the event and why the politician should be invited. Make it sure very, very clear about what it is that you want the politician to do. Is that politician going to be just introduced to the audience? Are they going to have an opportunity to address the audience? If they're going to be addressing the audience, make sure you're very clear about whether you want a major address, which is a 20 or 25-minute presentation, whether you want him or her to bring greetings from the particular the city or the province or the territory or the federal government, and that's a very short thing. If you want him or her to participate in the giving of any awards, be very clear what it is you want to do, not only so that they know what to expect and be prepared, but also that they know whether or not they should be accepting the invitation. Obviously, a more integrative role, a more profiled role is something that's going to attract him or her to attend. Be very clear about where they come to, where they're supposed to be able to park. I'm always amazed at the number of invitations over the years that I've been in contact with that says, come to the, for example, University of Alberta. It's a huge place. Where is it supposed to go to? Make sure that there's someone at the door to welcome the individual. Make sure that they are signed in, that they are introduced to the key people in the organizing committee, that they meet the board, all of those kinds of things, because it's very awkward to arrive and not know who it is you're supposed to be speaking to. And remember, this is the beginning of a great relationship. So treat them as a guest. Make sure that if there's going to be photo opportunities, that both the elected official knows that there's going to be a photographer there. If they're bringing a photographer there, if you're inviting a premier or a cabinet minister, then make sure you ask questions about how you're going to be able to get the photographs afterwards, how soon they're going to come. Make sure that you have all that information so that you can share that with the people whose photos were taken. If there's going to be media invited also and media attending, you can certainly tell the elected official in your letter that media is going to be attending, and then you should follow up with the individual as soon as you hear confirmation from the media that they're going to be attending, so they know and are not surprised. It often works very well for the people of the organizing committee to have a few moments with the individual you've invited, to be able to talk to them about things that are of concern to them, so that it's a real personal opportunity to make an impact with not only the issues that are facing you, but being able to put a name and face and personality to the elected official you're inviting. So I hope that gives you some information about what it is you should be doing if you want someone just to come. If, on the other hand, what you're doing is establishing a government relations policy or government relations plan to be able to engage elected officials and decision makers, could be senior civil servants, in solving some of the issues or becoming aware of the opportunities and successes. Don't ever think that it's just about talking to them about the problems. Talking to elected officials and civil servants about the things that are going right is equally and almost more important than some of the challenges, because you can't speak to the challenges if you haven't already established a relationship. It's much easier to establish a relationship about things that are going well. Being able to do that, if this is the beginning of your efforts to do that, then we can talk about that a little bit in the next few slides. But it basically says is, find out who has the powers to make decisions. If you want to talk to someone about that there is an opportunity to engage volunteers across the sector rather than just volunteers that are involved in what's so-called charity, in other words, social services. If you want to be able to demonstrate to the government how important volunteers are across the 12 subsectors, then maybe what you want to do is speak to the premier, or you want to speak to the mayor, or the most senior person that has some influence on how public policy is rolled out in your community. If it's something that you want to talk about a particular program, then make sure that you're speaking to the decision maker or the elected official who knows something about that program. You're not always going to have cabinet ministers be able to attend events. So if you are having an MLA or a private member of parliament who are not cabinet ministers, make sure that they actually get a chance to be able to get a briefing from their from the ministry that does deal with the issue that you're talking to them about, so that they are well versed. Find out what motivates influencers. You know, last week I met with a provincial cabinet minister, and one of the things I said to the colleagues that I was working with, it's on a board that I sit, so it wasn't for Volunteer Alberta, is that this particular minister really liked media, was good with media, liked to be able to demonstrate that, understood the power of media. And so that the conversation that we had to have had to be able to position him so that he could see that there was going to be a media opportunity. They also wanted to know that, is it attributable actions? In other words, is it that you want to be able to say to the government, thank you for something, or you have caused something, and this is the challenge we're now facing because of public policy. And is it policy generation? Policy generation often deals with the future. So here in Alberta, because we have had a recent leadership campaign and we have a new premier, Premier Alison Redford, and she has clearly said that government is going to do things differently and there's going to be a public policy change. We who are in the nonprofit sector are very anxious to be working with her on that policy generation. And so it is something that we here in Alberta are really focused on in the next 6 weeks to 2 months before the next election. That means that government relation plans are being sharpened up, have been changed dramatically for anybody that's working in this business from the previous government. The rules are quite different now, and it's much more open. So here we are, reaching government, how to advocate to government effectively. So who is it you need to influence? What do you need from them? Understand the network change. So there is a philosophy that you go to ministers, mayors, and premiers and prime ministers only to say thank you, that you should be working with their staff, both within their ministry office or within the mayoralty office, their own executive assistants and chiefs of staff and those policy people, That's who you should be working with, so that the issue is solved by the time you go speak to the mayor or the minister or the prime minister. I'm not necessarily one who believes that. I think that there's sometimes a very clear reason that you want to speak to the mayor or the city councilor or the minister about a particular issue. Their staff will be in the meeting with you, and you can have the conversation, always, always, always being respectful of the fact that they may not know more than you about this issue, but that they will have the larger picture of where your issue fits into the discussion. So always make sure that when you are meeting with elected officials, that you leave time to have the conversation. I always recommend that you come up with 3 messages. Practice those messages. Practice it to the mayor, practice it to your staff, practice it to anybody who will listen, so that when you go in, you have your 3 key messages, and then pause. Leave time for the minister and the minister's staff, or the mayor and the mayor's staff, to be able to start asking questions, of which then you can clarify. I recently met with a cabinet minister on behalf of another organization that I was working with on behalf of Volunteer Alberta, and no matter how much I had coached this individual, 3 points, 5 minutes, pause, this individual didn't stop. And it was a completely useless meeting because the minister couldn't get a word in edgewise, and consequently that file has gone nowhere. So make sure that you know your stuff cold. Make sure you can do it 1, 2, 3. Tell the minister, just like when you're making a presentation, these are the 3 points I'm going to talk about. This is, and then say it, and then pause and ask for the minister's response. When you want to reach government, as I said here, the bigger the group, more exposure about the issue, the more pressure is felt by government to make the change, or at least, if not to make the change, to be able to discuss with you. Just like any other natural human conversations you're going to have with anybody, you're going to want to be able to create a friendly, positive, and constructive relationship with government. It doesn't matter if you agree with 100% of what they do or they don't do. It is our government. It is our right to be able to speak to them. But they're obviously going to be more likely to want to do that when they don't feel that they're going to be ambushed or harangued the entire time. You can set up interest in your particular issue that will make it easier to have a meeting with an elected official if you use the press through earned media. Earned media is different than advertising. Advertising you obviously pay for, and that's one thing. Earned media is when journalists do a story. Now, in many of the larger metropolises in Canada, they are starting to have newspapers that have an opportunity for the nonprofit sector to be able to post and have discussions about issues that are important in your community. Here in Edmonton, the Edmonton Journal has The Bridge, which allows the nonprofit sector, I'm a member of this particular committee, to be able to go and start conversations and post. Because one of the things that I've learned over the last few years, it has become increasingly harder to get media time. I think at the Edmonton Journal they said that they're averaging 1 response to 60 requests from the nonprofit sector for time and coverage of all their events. So what you need to be able to do is to be able to be on the list of the media if there's an issue that they call you, or be able to attract their attention. And that's the subject of an entirely different conversation and webinar around media, which is also going to be available through Volunteer Canada. The other way to reach government is be where the politicians are. It's not very hard to actually figure out where politicians are going to be. Everybody gets invitations to lunches and dinners and breakfasts on behalf of clubs and events that are going on. There's constituency associations for every party, regardless if the person is elected or not. There are town halls and open meetings. All those kinds of things that you should be making yourself available to, making sure that you've got your business card, your name, and be able to have something short, brief, and catchy to be able to say to the politician when you get a chance to meet him or her. Now, in small towns and small communities throughout Canada, this isn't as difficult because most people know their politician. They certainly know at least one level of government politician, and it's much easier to have those conversations. But as those of us who are in larger urban centers, it makes it more difficult to be able to establish that relationship. I encourage you to do so. One of the things that is very frustrating is the inclusion of women in political activity, inclusion of women in events where politicians are. We need to be able to step up and start to have those conversations if we really want to have impact on public policy. Getting acquainted with your government official means three things. They are already accountable to their constituents. We've got a natural connection with them if you understand this. They're interested in being seen to do good. I think that's not being critical. That's just being what they are. And they're interested in increasing their networks. It's very easy for them to increase their networks these days because they've all got email lists and social media. Make sure that you're engaging on those kinds of mechanisms. Most elected officials, and certainly civic officials, will respond to polite calls for meetings, mails, and really appreciate it when you have to meet with them when you don't want something. It's perfectly acceptable to make an appointment to go in to say, let me tell you about our volunteer center. Let me tell you that a couple things about volunteering in the 21st century. One is volunteering isn't free labor. That's not the way to look at it. What it is community engagement. And it's not a question of where would we be without volunteers if we didn't have volunteers. That's not the question because that's not going to happen. We're always going to be having some element of volunteers involved in our community. What's more important is that they understand that nonprofit organizations are being challenged in these days to be able to engage 21st century volunteers. Those are not the volunteers who want to show up at the hospital gift shop every Tuesday and Thursday between 2 and 4 p.m. Volunteers in the 21st century are wanting to be able to be engaged in very meaningful work when they are available to do it. You could talk to them about the rising number of senior citizens over 65 who are going to be opening up an entire new way to engage volunteers. Senior citizens who have had productive working careers are not old at 65, and they're going to want to be engaged in the community. Being able to understand what the challenges are for public policy, to have new kinds of people engaged in volunteering, requires us to be more strategic about who we ask to be our leaders of volunteers. That it's not good enough anymore just to have really nice people being leaders of volunteers. There are serious HR opportunities and challenges. Having those kinds of conversations about the industry and about the sector that we're passionate about is going to make a difference to them when you want to be able to have the conversation about issues that are important to you, that are something that is critical that you have that contact with. It's tough to start at the top if you haven't actually started to engage people in the sector or people in government, whether they be elected or senior officials, in some of your issues and some of your networks. So if the only time you go see them is because you've got a problem, that's a real challenge to be able to get someone's ears. That's why I'm saying to you that National Volunteer Week 2012 should be the start of a year of government relations for you and your organization. So that in 2013, I guarantee you that if you spent a year doing some of the government relations and some of the things you're learning today, some of the things that other people in your community could give you advice on who have been successful in government relations, I guarantee you that 2013 will be much easier and a much more knowledgeable elected official who comes to your event then. Here are 6 ways that you can be actively engaged in your campaign in your community. One is follow a campaign, either a political campaign if you've got one going on, or what's going on in the constituency association and in the world around politicians. Stay up to date on news. Understand if there's something going on in your community that you think that an elected official will be interested in, and you can meet him or her there. Make sure you get yourself an invite and go. Participate in social media. This is something that just absolutely amazes me, is the amount of information that is available on Twitter and social media. There are those people who believe that you have to be on it 24 hours a day. I think those people should get a life. But if, checking in with it is really important, because you're going to know what sometimes the more active politicians are thinking and comments that you could make. They also pay attention to who's talking to them on Twitter and through social media. Create strength to attract political interest. Lots of times people believe that it's only their board members that should go and speak to elected officials. And I disagree with that. I know that from my experience, there are other people in the community who perhaps are far more knowledgeable about the issues than our board, or are already known to the elected official and can open the door. That's certainly what I do here in Alberta for the two organizations that I am working with provincially, and I've also tried to do that at times for Volunteer Canada nationally. So when I say create strength to attract political interest, find people who can share your beliefs, share your knowledge, and add to the richness of the conversation that you want to have with the elected official. Go to debates and forums. Yes, I know they're on Saturday afternoons, and sometimes they're out or in the evenings, and they're outside your work time. But going to these and being able to introduce yourself to the people speaking and to the organizers is hugely important, especially if you're going there, even if you're going because the forum is about something that it's basically a contentious subject. Go, be reasonable, provide your business card, write on the back of your business card what it is that you're talking about to the politician, because they're not going to remember all these people, and give it to them and tell them you've written on the back of your business card, these are the issues you're involved and interested in. Attend meetings. There are lots of capacity organizations in this country who are looking to be able to demonstrate that the nonprofit voluntary sector, volunteer engaging organizations are a huge, huge strength of Canada. And the capacity organizations often arrange meetings and events so that your voice can be heard. First of all, buy a membership in the organization, because the $35 or $40 or $50 is well spent for you to be able to leverage your own understanding into their networks. And B, attend the meetings and that when they have it. Know who you're speaking with. It's really important to do as much work as you can. Not only do you have to read the bio, the official bio, but ask other people what they know about the person you're going to meet, so that you can understand a little bit about what it is. That's a few slides ago. What is it that they want? Is it something that they want to be associated with good works? Do they want to be, are they in media? Do they love the media limelight? Is that what motivates them? Find out what it is that motivates them. Find out what the government platform is. Read things like mandate letters. Read things like speech from the throne. You can quickly do searches now for the word volunteer or voluntary sector in any of the written documents that are produced by the government. See what it is that they're saying. You will not be badly served by that investment in time and research. Know your facts, ask questions, and be courteous. I cannot stress the last one. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we believe that politics and public policy is all around self-interest and personal gain. I can tell you, for someone who's been in this business now for 35, 34 years, that is not the case. Politicians, by far the vast majority of them, are there for the absolutely right reasons. And if we go in and have conversations with them that are testy, negative, and destructive, you're not going to get anywhere. You're much, much, much better off to be courteous. And although this may seem to you like preaching to the converted, I can also tell you that I have been involved many, many times with the negative, watching people do negative, and it is just inappropriate. Use time effectively, which also tells me I need to be speaking and getting this over with, because you only want to be doing a few more minutes listening to me. But make sure that you've got your own calendar and that you're always making sure you're watching your time, and offer to leave before you're told to leave. Always, always, always follow up with a written or typed letter, and be strategic in your documentation. Do not write email thank yous. You can certainly write your letter and have a PDF and have it attached to it sent by email, but do not write email thank yous. They're unprofessional. They're not considered to be a worthy value for the time that the politician has spent with you. And make sure that whatever you're doing is extending your relationship beyond National Volunteer Week. You want to have win-wins when this is all done. You want to have some degree of control. You want to be able to be invited back for whether it's public policy or for any events at all that will move your volunteer center and volunteerism forward on the political agenda. There's some resources listed here in front of you. I would also suggest to you that the Volunteer Canada has huge experience in public policy and can also give you some guidance if you're a member. And the capacity organizations in your community and your province also have websites. If you want more information, there's 2 places you can go on nationalvolunteerweek.ca or, of course, volunteercanada.ca. We're always looking at Volunteer Canada. They have some of your stories of success and what's worked. We welcome your questions and your solutions so that we can all learn from it. And thank you very much for listening. Again, it's Karen Lynch from Volunteer Alberta. Thank you.